talk about Rogue One spoilers. Hey everybody, it's been a few days since we did our initial review of Star Wars Rogue One. If you'd like to check that out, click the link somewhere here. What I wanted to talk about today, even though it's days later and probably the entire universe has seen the movie, I think probably at this point, because like over the opening weekend, it made like $155 million quadrillion dollars and opened huge. So probably everyone's seen it, but everyone keeps asking what are my thoughts on the movie spoiler-wise. And I didn't want to get into it in the initial review because we never want to ruin things for folks in case they haven't seen the movie yet. And I know some folks still realistically haven't seen the movie, but for those that have, check this out, or for those that want some of the stuff spoiled, check this out. If not, skip this video, and we'll be back tomorrow with other content for everybody that doesn't want to hear one Star Wars fanboy's thoughts on the film. Now, we already gave our rating in our non-spoiler review, and again, that's linked somewhere here. And I think the general consensus for the family, including myself, was that this was a 3.5 star film. Since I put up that video, I had tons of comments with people come back and say, how could you only give this 3.5 stars? I think we had the same type of response last year with The Force Awakens. I think we live in a culture now that there's two things happening here. One is folks want to overly love things that come out because they're new. For example, Godzilla, or the last Jurassic Park movie that was made. Both were okay movies, not particularly my favorite movies. And the other part is, there's some folks that haven't lived with Star Wars maybe as closely or for as long as I am. I'm an old timer. I saw the original Star Wars movie in the movie theater. Obviously, this is just a small sampling of the stuff behind me that, makes up my daily life around the house. Star Wars is part of my life, huge part. But that's not to say that 3.5 stars is bad either. I think that 3.5 stars is a very fair rating for this movie. To put it in perspective, if I gave this movie a 4.5 or a 5, which I think some folks are really, really, hardcore pushing towards, it kind of makes me think, then what would you give the original Star Wars movie or The Empire Strikes Back? Because to me, you have a scale, and movies are falling within that scale, and you can't just say, well, this was a 5, even though it's not as good as A New Hope, which may be a 5, or Empire Strikes Back, that's a 5. It's a 5, but it's not that good of a 5. And if it's not that good of a 5, then, it's less than a 5. So just to give you some background on why I gave this 3.5 stars. And I will give you detailed thoughts and feedback from my perspective. But if I needed to rank the movies at this point, I would say still Empire Strikes Back, best movie so far in all of Star Wars. After that, I would say A New Hope, then Return of the Jedi, then Force Awakens, then Rogue One, then Revenge of the Sith, Attack of the Clones, and Phantom Menace. I don't think I left any out. Hopefully I didn't. If I did, you guys will probably jump all over me. But that's the way I would rank things. I don't think that this movie is better than the original trilogy. I don't think it's better than The Force Awakens either. But it certainly is better than the prequel trilogy that was out. That's my opinion. But anyway, and having said that, I think that this movie was exceptionally done, or was done exceptionally well for it being a Franken movie. And what I mean by that is that, for those not in the know, Gareth Edwards is, kind of on the red carpet. He's doing all the press for the movie, and rightfully so. This was a Gareth Edwards film. However, I think that a lot of the credit that Gareth Edwards is maybe getting may not necessarily be for stuff that Gareth Edwards did. For those that don't know, Gareth Edwards portrayed this as a very war-related movie, a dark movie. It fit well within the context of the original Star Wars, but it wasn't necessarily what George Lucas eventually made into these really big buddy bonding type films, or humor injected films. I think that his vision was to keep things somewhat dark. And I know folks that originally saw initial cuts or pieces of the scripts and things like that kind of likened it to like a Black Hawk Down type of film, which I think is a great concept. But Disney didn't think that it was necessarily that great of a concept, and they brought in Tony Gilroy, who did a tremendous amount of rewriting and reshoots to the movie, to the tune of, at least what's been presented out there, a $5 million price tag. And to put that in perspective, J.J. Abrams, for The Force Awakens, for kind of doing the writing, directing, producing, front to end of the film, made $10 million. So Tony Gilroy did an awful lot of work and kind of hodgepodge these two films or pieces together, and it came out exceptionally well. It is a Franken movie to me. It's the same concept as what I think folks saw over the summer with Suicide Squad, that really didn't play out to the same level of achievement as this movie. Some of those reshoots are fairly obvious. If you were really hyped up for the movie leading up to this and you saw some of the behind-the-scenes shoots, a lot of the stuff that took place at Celebration in Europe for their sizzle reel, as well as the trailers that came about, it had tons of stuff that didn't make the movie, most of which Disney is still hyping up. If you watched our video from the other day at Hollywood Studios, and you could check that link out somewhere up here, they still included that line from Jyn Erso where she says in the trailer, if something along the lines of like, if this is a rebellion, or this is a rebellion, right? So I rebel. That never gets said in the movie, but they still felt the need that they'd include it in the park. It's kind of, in the show that's in the park, it's kind of funny just how much stuff did get cut or things got reworked. So if you see like in the trailers, the kind of like the casts of the rebels running along the beach, you could see them holding the data tapes that they had stolen. Obviously the movie did not end originally with them transmitting the data from the tower, and had them more scrambling from that point across the beach, and as they were carrying these items that are in the trailer. It doesn't happen in the film. Likewise, some of the aliens didn't make it into the film into the same type of prominence that were in the trailers, etc. Or one of the big scenes that was used throughout all of the trailers was, Jyn kind of walking out onto this platform and seeing this massive TIE fighter, come up, and as she confronts it, it never happened. I mean, that's more of like the Phantom Menace than the movie The Phantom Menace. Just the amount of scenes and the stuff that you look back afterwards and say, what the heck happened? Like, I could have sworn that this was stuff that happened, and it just never did. All that aside, I still think the movie works. It fits really well with leading up to A New Hope. I think it dovetails incredibly well. At times, to me, it kind of felt like a fan film. For those that are old enough and can remember, before we were getting spoon-fed so many Star Wars types of media, there wasn't, cartoons on TV that were promoting the longevity of the series, and there wasn't additional movies. Folks were making these fan films, and some of them were quite elaborate, and this kind of felt at times a little bit kind of like that. And I don't know if folks realize this as well, but this was an idea, at least this lead-in idea for how the plans get stolen, for a good number of years. This was something that was pitched repeatedly and shut down when Lucas had control of the franchise, all the way up to the point of when there was the live-action TV series that never came to be before Disney bought the franchise from Lucasfilm, or from George Lucas. It was pitched over and over. It never went through, and finally, when Disney acquired the rights to Star Wars, got pitched again, and now we have it made. Alright, so for the rest of the video, I think I'm going to try to just break this down into some deeper thoughts about the movie, our favorite scenes from the movie, or my favorite scenes, and then characters and what I think about the individual characters. And having said that, some of my deeper thoughts or things that kind of just come to mind. The movie doesn't have a crawl, right? For anyone that's seen the movie, you realize that the movie just starts. We've got action to begin with, and then you have this story. You have the title come up across the screen, and it's not the greatest font of all time. I know Rebel Force Radio talked about it being kind of like Fontgate, right? It's not the greatest font. It doesn't necessarily fit within the Star Wars universe as far as the types of fonts that they've used before. I think not having that crawl in the beginning it almost takes you out of the initial sequences, because you become so accustomed to seeing, the great big beginning of John Williams' score and seeing the background go through. Having said that, I realize that this movie is essentially the crawl for A New Hope, so maybe that's why they kept the things separate. And to further on the score piece, I think this movie really lacked a good score to go with the film. The acting and some of the characters I really fell in love with during the movie, and some of the action sequences, but the music that you're hearing to go with it, it just never really supplemented things the way that Star Wars scores normally go. John Williams, I think, is just as integral to Star Wars, and I had this conversation with some of the folks from the Orlando system back before The Force Awakens was even being made, when it was just a rumor of Harrison Ford coming back to play Han Solo and things like that, and you thought, what's more important, like Harrison Ford or John Williams? And I kind of put them almost as like equal in movies, John Williams really, his work embodies Star Wars. You hear the score from any of the Star Wars movies, and you know exactly what it is. The current score was done by Michael Giacchino. I might be butchering that name. I'm totally not a fan, and I'm just being honest. I think it really took away some of the impact of the movie. I think this is the one score that I probably will not purchase to listen to in the future. The mix of the camera shots in the movie were awesome. I think we've gotten used to a certain way that Star Wars is presented to us, with a certain amount of up-close shots or wide shots and things. And the filming of this movie had a variety of shots that had not been used before in Star Wars. Things that jumped out to me, at least, when we're in space battle, and you have almost like a very close third-person perspective, almost to where it's like a first-person POV with like a GoPro almost like strapped on the X-Wing, where you're seeing it come in and you're part of like the action. That stuff looked phenomenal. There was a lot of handheld shots, so I think like when we saw the battle scene with kind of the skirmish with the tanks and the stormtroopers and everything, there were a lot of kind of almost like shaky type shots that were done with handheld, and those were things that I've never seen in Star Wars before that looked just absolutely amazing. The faraway shots, the variety of things, and kind of like the way that they flowed from scene to scene, I thought that was exceptionally done. I'm going to say exceptionally throughout this whole video. This is the exceptional spoiler review. Some of the stuff towards the end where they had some of the characters like Gold Leader, Red Leader, and again, I think casual fans may not even realize this, those were scenes that were cut from A New Hope and just integrated into this film. It doesn't look any different like they just filmed it today versus it being filmed back in 1974 or 5, 6, before the movie got released. The scenes looked seamless, no matter if it was being shot on film or being shot digitally, and the variety of different cameras that they used, everything fit and it worked. I think that was probably the high point of the movie to me is the cinematography part. It looked flawless, and I don't think that some casual fans may have realized it, but that was fantastic. For anything that the score took away from me, the cinematography really did very well. Some of my favorite scenes, obviously, probably the greatest scene in the last 30 years or so was not the very end scene, but the 5 minutes leading to the end scene with Vader in full-on kick-ass mode. You see him coming, down a hallway, and he is just tearing through rebel soldiers. Force choking, lightsaber action. When I was a kid, and I still, even to this day, when we watch A New Hope and you look at Vader facing, the old Obi-Wan, he moves in like slow motion. I always wondered like how intimidating could this guy be? I mean, geez, like, he takes his sweet time, like swinging his lightsaber and stuff. And you had to figure this is literally like, a day or 2 days before that scene. He mows through people like you would in a video game. That was a fanboy's dream come true, that scene, at least just going through at the end. When this Blu-ray comes out, that'll be the scene that gets, every fanboy will be sitting there and hitting like that rewind button or that do-over button that loops for like the last 30 seconds, and you could just watch that over and over again. Sticking with Vader, his castle coming to life in the film, we see the shot of Krennic's shuttle coming down, and it's on that, this big planet that's engulfed in lava and flames, and you see Vader's castle, and you get into Vader's castle, and he's in this bacta tank. That was, to me, like when they showed that scene to begin with, I jumped out of my seat. I was, we were sitting in seats that had full-on recliners, and I like mashed the button down so I could sit up, and I it's like my eyes were popping out of my head. Like, this is amazing. That was straight out of like concept art from old Macquarie stuff, and just amazing. I am a huge Vader fan, and to see what they did, not only with the castle being portrayed, but him in the bacta tank, and drawing that parallel to Luke being in the bacta tank in Empire Strikes Back. Again, it kind of just once again kept this parallel going of someone being so incredibly powerful, and being tempted, but obviously Vader going the wrong way and Luke going the right way, but so many similarities happening within their lives. Just awesome stuff. But the weird thing to me, with the planet, when they land, every planet in the movie, no matter how many times they visit that same exact planet, has the name of the planet on the bottoms of the screen out there. The only planet they didn't say where it was that lava planet, and it's been since confirmed from Pablo Hidalgo and folks that indeed was Mustafar, which, for those that are long-time Star Wars fans know, Mustafar is where the final battle happened, where Anakin moved from being Anakin to Darth Vader and fighting Obi-Wan Kenobi. Eventually gets his legs cut off, has the lava overtake him and kind of melt his body, and gets rescued by the Emperor before they put the suit on him and put him into the mechanical humanoid form of Darth Vader that we know today. I thought it was really weird that they didn't announce the name of the planet, although it's in the books that go along with the movie, as well as it being confirmed. My own opinion of this is that maybe Disney wants to shy away from any of the prequel type of feedback, since that movie was obviously part of the prequels. It kind of goes along with even Clone Wars kind of ending, and focus on Rogue One, and same thing with like Mustafar. We want to acknowledge that that's where it is. Obviously he's there, but we don't really advertise like the prequels type of thing. But how cool is it for him to be on Mustafar when that's essentially the last place that his full human form was there. He watched Padme die there, and at least the buzz is that he's put on Mustafar from Palpatine, so that his rage and his inner hatred can continue to like fester, so that he becomes that much more powerful and evil as a being, because that's what he's surrounded with all the time. And that's just brilliant to kind of put that out there, so that that's what's driving or fueling Vader to be as evil as he is. Likewise, I believe later on in the comics they reference the fact that after the Death Star is blown up, Palpatine kind of punishes Vader by putting him on Tatooine. He's surrounded by the fact of this is where he was a slave when he was a kid, and this is where his mother died, etc. It just kind of gives a little bit more insight. I know, as much as I've criticized needing to keep up with the books and the comics and Rebels and everything else, to kind of see, you know, what's going on in this full complete picture. That's kind of the bigger, better picture, I think, that they're able to paint within all of these gaps and show just how manipulative the Emperor is, and just how enraged Vader is, and what's fueling his desire to lash out at everything else outside of you know, anything that's good. Some of the other scenes that I really enjoyed, again, the street warfare, you know, the guerrilla warfare type stuff that took place with the tank, then stormtroopers, and between Cassian and Chirrut and those guys. I thought the action sequences were top notch. I think, you know, to me, it really felt like you were in a war zone, and that's something that has maybe not been as present in Star Wars. It certainly wasn't present in the work that was done in the prequels. And I think the closest that you may have come to it in the prequels is really, you know, Attack of the Clones, where you had two sides kind of converging on each other, where it was like the Jedis and, you know, the other people. I don't think it had the same feeling. And I think that you know, that particular scene, as well as the end scene, are the pieces that you know, folks are really taking out of the movie theater and saying, like, that's phenomenal. And I agree, that is phenomenal. Those were the pieces that were the best in the movie. The dialogue and the character building at times was a little lackluster, but I think overall, like the dialogue in the jail cell in Saw Gerrera's hideout was really fun to watch. You know, my standout character, and I'll get to this a little bit more, was definitely Chirrut. I'm not butchering that name either. I think it's Chirrut Imwe. I don't know. But hands down my favorite character in the movie. You know, the Force is with me. Everybody left the movie theater saying the same line over and over again. Phenomenal character development with that character. Obviously Force sensitive. You know, kind of reminded me a little bit more, if you were a fan of like Star Wars role-playing games or Star Wars Galaxy, you know, where you didn't necessarily have to be a Jedi or have a Jedi story in order for things to be Star Wars. But the dialogue in that jail scene, where they first start talking to Bodhi, and kind of, you know, springing him out of jail and the planet is blown up, I thought that was top notch. And then, you know, as far as the you know, one of the things that I think really took away, because I am singing the praises of, now you're probably really going to say, like, well, why wouldn't this movie get 5 stars based off of the praise that you're saying? The Death Star scenes themselves, you know, whether it was taking out the area for Saw Gerrera or taking out Scarif, you know, in A New Hope, they really kind of say, you know, we want to test this to, you know, and you know, they tested out on Alderaan, and now it's fully functional and things like that. There were certain things that kind of ran in contrast, right? You know, the Death Star, you know, I kind of felt like, you know, we were kind of like almost overkill. It was awesome to see the planets being destroyed, and almost kind of reminded me of terraforming, the same thing that we saw in Batman versus Superman or other movies, you know, where the planets are, you know, blowing up from the inside. It did take a lot longer for the destruction of planets or cities compared to what we saw in A New Hope. You know, we basically, you know, you shoot Alderaan and it's just massive explosion, everything's gone. It's not so much here, and I always understand it's for, you know, kind of getting that cinematic impact of what's happening with the characters' lives as these things are happening. But we're at the point now of like Death Star overkill. I'm praying that the next Star Wars movie has zero to do with the Death Star again. We are, for as big as a fan of the Death Star as I am, and there's Death Star stuff everywhere, I am Death Starred out. All right, let's talk about some characters. Jyn Erso. I have not talked about Jyn Erso much in the context of this review. And that is to say probably a lot. I think Jyn Erso was a fine enough lead character. She fits within the Star Wars context of, you know, here's another unwilling type of person that's brought into battle, and, you know, we've kind of seen this thing repeatedly, you know, whether it was like the Han Solo type character, or even in the last movie where we had Finn kind of brought into things, and it's somebody that's all of a sudden is like, hey, we're along for the ride, but we're going to be the heroes now, and it was kind of more of the same. Jin, I think, did a well enough job. It was interesting the day after we saw the movie in the theater and went to Hollywood Studios, and immediately the poll that was presented on the screen before the Star Wars show started was basically like, who's a better leader, or who would you rather go into battle with? And it was Jin posted up against Rey, and to me, I looked at it as like, why does it have to be the two females together, and drawing a comparison, as opposed to any one of the other heroes that would have been in the movie. I think after you get past the part of Jin's character kind of being that type of unwitting hero to others, her character didn't necessarily do anything for me, in the same way as Chirrut did in the film. We saw the backstory of Jin. She had the crystal around her neck. I'm still not sure if that crystal signifies that maybe she was supposed to be force sensitive also, or if it's just a tie-in to, that her dad was working to mine the crystals, and in turn gave her a souvenir from the place that she was working, that he was working at the time. I think, maybe Jin's story was lacking because we didn't necessarily see what transpired between the time that Saw found her to the point of where she's at in the movie. Moving on to Cassian Andor, I liked the character to a degree, although it really, his character kind of put it out there, in full sight that maybe the rebels aren't always the good guys either, or the most pure guys. And I think that was evident later in the movie when they gather all of the troops together and they say, like, we've all done some pretty bad things. I mean, we saw Cassian, with a spy getting information, then realizing the spy might flip when pressured by stormtroopers, and killed the man in pure blood. And then we saw him taking orders to try to kill Galen or so later in the movie, and was going to do so until he had that late change of heart. His character wasn't necessarily heartwarming. It really kind of just made me feel like he was, he's a soldier. He was there to do what he needed to do. But he wasn't one of those good guys that you necessarily would get behind and looked at in like the other Star Wars type movies as, blindly being good. I know that the Han Solo character arc is that, he was in it for money to begin with, etc. And then kind of changed and had a heart of gold, to save Luke at the end of A New Hope. But Cassian doesn't really necessarily give that vibe off to me. As a matter of fact, I was taken out of the movie quite a bit between Cassian as well as Body, where we got to the end of the movie and I wasn't sure if maybe one of them was going to double cross the rest of the team because of their prior lives that were explained during the movie. I'm going to talk about Orson Krennic a little bit. Krennic, nothing against him himself, but from the moment that he walked on screen, I could not stop thinking of Paul Gleason, who is the teacher from the Breakfast Club who has to watch the kids on the Saturday while they're in detention. It just was a striking resemblance to me, and it probably is just a me thing, but I couldn't stop thinking of him. Mendelsohn, to me, obviously, or Ben Mendelsohn, I thought his portrayal for Krennic was really good, but it was interesting to see, we're at this point now in the history of the Empire where, you know, everyone's fighting for this pecking order. You know, and you never really got that from these other Star Wars movies. I didn't, you know, I'm not sure that, you know, in the grand scheme of things, in my sci-fi, I need to know, like, which one of, you know, whether it's a good guy or a bad guy, like who's kissing ass to get ahead in the corporate ladder. But that's kind of the impression I got from Krennic, you know, like, hey, this guy's trying to take credit for what I did. You know, and it was like, wow, you know, it's like going back to like day job type of stuff. You know, that kind of stuff I didn't necessarily think needed to be in the movie. But his character, you know, he did what he could do to try to get ahead in the company, and ends up paying the price at the end anyway. So it sucked to be him. Donnie Yen as Chirrut Imwe. Again, you know, I don't want to spend like 8 minutes talking about this character, but there was just so much of a gap between, I think, his role and his character and all of the other characters that were discussed on the screen. You know, he had the key line from the movie, and he was, for all intents and purposes, the Obi-Wan Kenobi for this particular movie. You know, I wish there was a way that character could have carried on into other endeavors, because he was the only one that I was, you know, at the end, when everybody obviously ends up getting killed, and let's talk about that in a second, but he was the only one that I was really kind of upset about, you know, if I'm buying into all of these characters dying. Him, and ironically, K2SO, Alan Tudyk, or Tudyk, I always get his name wrong too, and we've met him before, he's such a nice guy. Outside of Chirrut Imwe, and again, I'm probably butchering his name, the droid is probably the person that you cared most about in the movie. His personality was amazing, you know, and his lines were great. He was like the buddy that everybody, I think, would want to have. And, you know, God, I would rather have a million more movies with K2SO than either R2 or C3PO, and just being completely honest about that. He was actually like the first droid that I really, really enjoyed seeing. I wish there was more to him in the movie. But and we want to talk about everybody dying in a moment when we get back to just running through these things. Riz Ahmed, or Ahmed, God, I'm really bad at butchering names, as Badi Rook. First thing that jumps out of my mind is like, hey, you know, the Imperials really slacked in, you know, dress or hairstyles. I mean, did he not have a ponytail? I'm pretty sure he had a ponytail in the movie. I couldn't imagine the Emperor being like cool with that. And that's really small potatoes to worry about or bitch about, because I'm sure I'll get called out about that. But he didn't have a lot to say, but for somebody, you know, Saw Gerrera's character was really untrusting of Badi, and everybody else was a little bit more accommodating and just buying into what he had to say. And again, I went through the rest of the movie thinking, you know, what could possibly happen? Like, is this guy going to turn on everybody at the end, you know, when it came to needing to transmit the plans? You know, it was really unnerving to me, you know, like whether he was going to turn on everybody. Kind of ironic also that we have 2 Star Wars movies in a row that Imperials defect from, you know, the Emperor or the Empire to join the rebels. I guess that's going to be the next thing, just like Death Stars. Last character, or got 2 more good guys to go. Zheng Wen as Baze. Oh God, I am reading off of a piece of paper, so people should know. Baze Malbus. I really enjoyed that character also. You know, he didn't have a lot to say. He's basically the muscle for Chirrut. But it was moving, you know, to see the 2 of them die, you know, and wanting to be together and be that close of a friend to each other. That was you know, a heartwarming part. Action-wise, I think their scene, when the AT-AT is coming through the trees, the palm trees, and coming after them, that was amazing. So that character I really enjoyed. I like this gun also. He had impeccable aim to be able to shoot as many stormtroopers as he could before they got off a single shot against him when he was defending Chirrut. Forrest Whitaker as Saw Gerrera. I don't know if I'm necessarily that big of a fan of that character. For folks that don't know, that character came over from the Clone Wars. It was announced this week that he'll also be joining Rebels, at least for one episode. I think that there were probably scenes that got deleted about that character to explain a little bit more why he was almost like the good guy version of Vader, with like the metallic legs, half human, half machine, and he couldn't breathe and things like that. Disappointing that they didn't get into some of his backstory, at least showing, why he was the way that he is. Yes, Galen Erso. I don't necessarily know if we needed Mads Mikkelsen to play the role, or if it was really, you could put anybody into that position. And, I think that he had a lot of screen time, and the hologram part, where he is explaining things to as far as like, I'm looking for my daughter Jyn, and also I've put this secret spot in the Death Star where somebody can blow it up, but I also looking for my daughter Jyn. That hologram message it was the most comprehensive message that we've ever seen, and the longest one for holograms than in any of the movies. But just kind of like, it was a rambling hologram. But when that character died, I didn't necessarily really care. I don't know how you paint him as a good guy one way or the other, whether he puts a weakness into the Death Star or not. He created the Death Star and continued to keep working on it. Let's talk about two characters that aren't necessarily credited, but obviously we saw them throughout the movie, at least one for a very long time in the movie, and that was Grand Moff Tarkin. Peter Cushing's long since dead. Face mapping done in the movie. Some of it looked really, really cool. It looked exceptional. So again, with exceptional things. Yeah, some of it looked really cool. Some of it was really lacking. Focus. Some of it really took me out of looking at the character, and I guess I'm kind of stuck in two sides of the argument for face mapping, right? If you can do face mapping the way that you can do it, and we're reaching that point in technology, it kind of opens up new possibilities for the future. It also makes me wonder, like, for the Han Solo standalone movie, why did you need to cast somebody young when you could have just used Harrison Ford and just did some face mapping? Or essentially, why do you need anybody anymore if you could just do all of this face mapping? On the flip side, obviously they did choose to go the route for the Han Solo movie of recasting that particular character. Why not recast Tarkin's role? It just seemed weird. He had a very large presence in the movie, much more than what I would have wanted to see in the movie itself. So that took me out of the film at certain parts. I mean, especially, to go back again about like, trying to climb the corporate ladder between, the scenes between him and Krennic arguing about who's going to take credit for the Death Star. I mean, that stuff is kind of really groan-worthy to me. On the other side of the spectrum, the other face mapping that took place at the end of the movie was Leia, and you either loved that scene or you hated that scene. I wasn't the biggest fan of it. I honestly can't understand why Leia would have been brought into battle. You have the princess on a ship that was, maybe 300 yards away from Vader, coming in to kill everybody. And they put her on a ship in the middle of that battle. A battle that seemed unwinnable. They were willing to like sacrifice everything, and they put her there just for the sake of continuity. That was weird to me. Again, they could have used somebody else in the movie. It was one of those things that I think, again, you either loved it or you hated it. I wasn't that big of a fan of seeing Leia in the movie, although I had a feeling that we probably needed to see her because Toy Advances gave the heads up that Wave 2 of toys for Rogue One would be including characters that were not yet announced for the movie. So, you kind of figured that Leia and 3PO and R2 would probably be thrown in the mix there somewhere. But additional cameos, we saw Doc and Ponda in there. Weird to see them in the middle of like a crowd scene. You know, that we know that only a day or two later they meet. You know, at least like we have an arm cut off and all kinds of bad news ahead for them in the cantina. You know, that seemed kind of shoehorned into the movie. The Rebel stuff, and that was one thing that I saw, you know, coming into the movie that I was really genuinely curious about. Star Wars Rebels was taking place about 4 years prior to this timeline happening, so what would happen? And of course we heard Hera being called over the loudspeaker at one point. We saw Chopper, at least a split second of Chopper. We saw the ghost ship multiple times in the movie. You know, it was cool to see the Rebel stuff, because I'm a big fan of Rebels, but the TV show, not the Rebels themselves. Obviously, I'm a bigger fan of Imperials, but it was great to see, you know, them being represented on the big screen. But you know, if you kill off everybody from you know, from Rogue One, how do you allow the Rebels to live on as well? So that part is kind of weird to me. I mean, that kind of just gives the unfortunate license to Dave Filoni and team to just keep the Star Wars Rebel stuff going like forever. I mean, now finally let's talk about everyone dying, because I think there was a lot of people that walked out of the movie theater and I was completely shocked that they thought that people would live. And you know, I had heard rumors that early versions of the script would include maybe Jyn and Cassian kind of living happily ever after on another planet somewhere, never to be mentioned again in Star Wars lore. And I'm glad that they didn't do that. You had to assume when you were going into this movie that everyone was going to die. They were never mentioned again throughout the rest of Star Wars, anything that we've seen. And basically in the crawl, they're telling you that this small band of rebels basically sacrificed themselves to get the plans. So why we would think that anyone would be living, or you know, come out of the movie as shocked about that, was kind of beyond me. But in any event, all that is said, this was an extremely long, exceptionally long video to tell you at least some of my thoughts, spoiler-wise. Before you know it, I'm sure this movie will end up being on Blu-ray, or by the time that I finish recording this, it'll be on Blu-ray, and I'll be picking it up. But the movie did well in the box office. Next year, we get Episode 8. Very much looking forward to Episode 8. The year after, we get the Han Solo movie. Maybe not so much looking forward to that as much as the continuation of the saga. But this movie was good for what it was, you know, for the purpose that it served. And again, I don't think it was a bad movie. I think it was a really good movie. It just wasn't necessarily as good as the original trilogy. So on that note, we're going to say goodbye for now. So thank you for all of your likes. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your subscriptions. Treat others the way you want to be treated. Have a great night. We'll see you guys. And if you have opinions about Star Wars Rogue One and you want to comment below, feel free to comment below. I'm going to try to answer as much as I can in the comments. Thank you.
You have failed me for the last time.